Good morning, everybody. I'm Janet Ivey, president of Explore Mars and CEO of Janet's Planet, and I am delighted to bring you this education panel today. I have some esteemed colleagues from around the world who are going to tell you just a little bit about who they are and what they do in education. So up first, I'm going to start with my good friend, Steve Sherman. Tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Hello, Janet and esteemed panelists, and of course, the people that are watching. I am Steve Sherman. I'm the Chief Imagination Officer for a STEAM-based NGO based in South Africa called Living Maths. And apart from physically working with a few thousand South African students in classrooms each week, and that was obviously pre-COVID, I also have the privilege of working with students around the world. And my main goal is to promote the excitement of STEAM-related subjects to as many people as possible.
Thank you so much. All right, George, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everybody. My name is George Sarkodie, and I'm a first-generation college graduate from Fort Worth, Texas. I'm a recent graduate from the University of North Texas, and I am the current Vice Chair of Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. What I do is I promote space exploration to our 80+ chapters across the United States.
We are so delighted, and what a gift you are to those 10,000 students who belong to SEDS. So thank you so much. Susan, please tell me who you are and what you do. It's fascinating.
Hi everyone. My name is Susan Murabana. I'm joining you from Kenya. And what I do is I'm the CEO of a company called the Traveling Telescope. And just like the name, we travel around with our telescope, trying to get as many people, especially young school kids, to look through the telescope, because we know that it has been around for more than 400 years, and yet so many people haven't had a chance to look through one. In addition to our telescope, we have a portable planetarium, and we've also just recently built a fixed planetarium out of bamboo. So we work a lot with schools, but also very keen to work with the general public and with the tourism sector.
Ah, beautiful work. I remember the first time I looked through a telescope, and it's transformative. Astronaut Charles, tell everybody about what you've done and what you're doing now.
Sure thing. I flew on STS-114 right after the Columbia accident. I've worked at NASA for 46 years, recently retired, and now I'm president, CEO of a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit called the Epic Education Foundation. We create content online. We get students around the world working real engineering challenges related to space, like sustaining humans on Mars. And it's totally STEAM based. You know, although we focus on STEM, it's really about bringing in students from all disciplines and inspiring that creative potential in all of us to solve challenges even NASA can't solve.
Ah, beautiful work. Thank you so much. All right, Zainab, tell us about what you do. I think it's profound, and this young lady look for a Nobel Prize, I have no doubt, or a Peace Prize or something.
Thank you, Janet. Hi, I'm Zainab. I'm from Canada, and I'm a recent high school graduate. I'll be going to the University of Toronto this month. I'm a UNOSA Space for Women mentor and one of the youngest future astronauts with Virgin Galactic. I'm also really passionate about education because I've co-founded the Global Initiative and Vision for Education, which is an NGO, short for GIVE. And we work to create a holistic 21st century educational model, system, and curriculum that allows for students to develop skills like innovation and creativity, which are needed for this day and age.
Again, a mover and a shaker, and I'm just delighted to know you. And my dear, dear friend, Artemis, tell a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're planning on doing. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, for one reason or the other, the unmute doesn't work. I'm Artemis Westenberg. I have been a mentor and tutor of students for the last 40 years. and of all ages, by the way, not just young people, also older people who are, you know, on a crossroads in their career and need some new guidance. I'm a co-founder of Explore Mars, and very recently I joined the Mars Academy of Susan Jewell as Chief Financial Officer, and I hope, of course, also to be involved with the training, because that's where really my heart lies, educating people and showing them that their lives could be so much more interesting and enjoyable if they find, you know, more than just what they learn at school.
Ah, beautiful. Well, obviously you guys can understand how excited I am to have this panel today. I want to kind of go a little bit round robin, and I'll do it as I see you on my screen. My next question is, why must we push for space education, and why now? And so, Steve, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, when you teach problem solving in math and science, while it's very important to give these skills a context, it is equally important to allow the students to see how these skills can be used in both practical and abstract ways. Space education allows students to dream about what is possible, to attempt to solve complex problems, and possibly create solutions that we never thought of before. Just think about the long duration flights to Mars and how this will give rise to so many challenges that require innovative thinking. And if we empower students with these skills early on, think about how this will transform the space industry.
And George, it's like, as a volunteer and vice chair of SEDS, why space education? Why is that so important for you and for your group?
So right now it's a perfect time. There are so many paths that students can take in today's space race, and the lowered entry barrier have allowed students to realize their space dreams. Like, for example, me, I last summer I was an intern at Baylor College of Medicine. Somehow I had opportunities to move industries from medicine to space because all the wonderful advisors and educational programs that are currently in place. So that's why I'm so excited about the growing interest in space exploration and the remarkable educational resources that have been created to meet the very high demand.
Beautiful. All right. So now it's like, Susan, tell me why. I mean, we understand the wonder of that telescope, but why do you think space exploration? Why now?
I think one of the reasons is, as we know, there's a huge space industry waiting for the young generation, and it's a way for us through space education to inspire them, and through the telescope, just looking up, also just imagining how unique our planet is and how we need to take care of it. So you look up and see, for example, Saturn floating up in space. Our planet is very similar, but it's able to, you know, we are able to live on it, and it's because it's the only one we know that would life would be able to survive. So just trying to show young kids and adults as well that yes, we live in this unique planet, but we also need to take care of it. So we need, and also that solutions on Earth are only going to come through science solving and everything. Even today with the pandemic, we're only going to get the solutions of the virus through science. So through space education, so much has come back on Earth that we benefit from that. So there's a lot that we benefit through space exploration.
And I couldn't agree more. There's something about, as we look out and there, we're always turning around with that eye back to Earth going, well, whatever we figure out that works there, most definitely will solve some things here. So Astronaut Charles, why did you kind of, like, I know your passion is space, you've been an astronaut. Why did you sort of switch your career focus to space exploration and education?
Well, it was a natural. Why space? Why now? I was a child during the space race of the 60s, And that totally inspired me for a career in science, technology, engineering, and math. But more importantly, it allows us to dream. Right, it was us against the Russians at that time. Unfortunately, it was a competition. But what that did for the economy in this country, for the education, more children were going into science, getting advanced degrees. We have that unique opportunity now. I wrote a paper on this called the Apollo effect. I think we have another Apollo effect, only greater. Right now, we have countries, students around the world trying to go to the moon, then Mars. And for all the reasons Steve said, it inspires the imagination, the creativity, and it holds that passion, it creates that passion.
Zainab, I know that you have had a lifelong love of space, but why did you create your organization and want to do space education for others?
So my passion for space started really young, and it wasn't really from school because they didn't teach space education, and I had resources to go to libraries and read the books, and I know many kids do not. And so with G.I.V.E, we're hoping to give more access to other people. And I think because space is this growing industry and it's going to be a significant part of our future, we need to create access so that everyone can be in that field if they want to be, if they choose to be. Because right now it's being filled with really one group of people who are quite rich or from a certain background. Another reason why space education is really, really important is because it has this universal appeal. And like many of the panelists said, it inspires wonder, it creates passion and curiosity, which can be transferred over to other fields. It doesn't just have to be in space. It can be a launching pad for students to go into other STEM fields. I have a lot of friends who started off loving astronomy, and because of the curiosity that they had and it allowed them to dream, as Charles said, they decided that another STEM field was better for them. And so I think also, lastly, the interdisciplinary nature of space education, connecting it with technology or philosophy, it also lets it be applicable to more than just astronomy itself. And I think that's really important in education.
Lovely. Artemis, I know that you have some feelings about why space education, so tell me.
Well, space as such, as a field, is the culmination of all human ingenuity. I mean, unless you're the best in anything, you're not going to be able to do space with humans. Even with robots, you need the best of the best of the best, and you need indeed the curiosity that others have named. Space is the glue that brings all the fields of research together, whether we're talking human exploration, human research, or robotic research. And it's, it's as much as about agriculture as it's about rocketry and philosophy and, how do we see ourselves? Because in the end, space is supposed to answer the question, are we alone in the universe? Or why us? Why does Earth have life? And why don't we, see that anywhere else at the moment? So this very fundamental question of who we are, where did we come from, and where are we going? That space is the one that's going to answer that.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's like in this new educational landscape, especially in the year that is 2020, what do you see? What do you see going forward as we hopefully bring not only more space education and STEM education to bear? Everybody wants to create that pipeline, but how do we do it even in this new landscape that we find ourselves in, where it's hybrid or virtual or digital? What do you think, Steve?
Well, as someone who's a huge fan of technology, I think that it's critical that we empower both students and teachers to be able to make use of the technology that's available. I also think that the universities need to realize that, of course, we need to get more students coming through that are going to take STEM-related subjects. And in order to do that, we need people to jump on board and help promote STEM. And I don't need to tell you this, but without being too controversial, if we look at the way that some of the countries around the world have handled the COVID pandemic, it's almost as if they've ignored that science even exists. So I think it's very important that we make students scientifically literate. We need to empower them show them the exciting prospects, the opportunities in the science world, and they will navigate or move in that direction naturally, because those opportunities are going to be amazing, especially now with the growth in new space and the space world the way it is at the moment.
Well, it's like I just read something that I found very interesting that, well, we all know that children are super adaptable. It's like Artemis joined me, Steve joined me, George even joined me for a graduation for some kids this summer online as we did a camp. And so kids are adaptable. They don't apparently get Zoom fatigue, or when it's engaging, they're super there. The new statistic that I just read, and again, I'm sure this is a little bit preliminary, but data suggests that kids are retaining 25 to 60% more in an online virtual setting, as opposed to only 8 to 10% retention in a normal classroom. And I have a feeling that's because they get a bit of autonomy in how they process the information. And maybe it's like that door opens just ever slightly, and then they can, after the class is over, they have the opportunity to follow any of these little trails their curiosity might want to travel. So I'm excited about that particular piece of data, because I go, even though that it's been, a flip, and congratulations to every teacher out there who is doing amazing work from digital, online, virtual, hybrid, whatever scenario you're in. But I think what's encouraging to me is that children are ever adaptable, and that synchronous and asynchronous learning does indeed work virtually. George, what has been your experience as you've engaged with the students from around the country in SEDS? How did you guys flip and change in this new environment?
We are predominantly virtual. So once, except for our students who build CubeSats or rockets, but one thing is with elective learning. As we know, learning happens throughout the process and not necessarily at the end of a subject. So students who have portfolios have a chance to reflect and to capture their learning. Our students take the time to review, plan, and set new goals each year or each semester. And I think this type of assessment helps them grow and retain information.
And it sounds like you guys normally do it virtually anyway. Is that true?
Yes, except for when they physically have to build.
Gotcha. All right. And so Susan, obviously probably the year that it's 2020 has affected how you do things. How have you flipped or changed in this new environment?
Yes, it's true that it has been very different for us, because our idea was to get as many, and still to get as many people to look through the telescope. But what we had to do during this time was create programs where we could still engage our audience, especially school kids. And there are robotic telescopes, and there's access to that as well, or online programs, or even trying to have kids join in and see the virtual world. But what we've done as the Traveling Telescope are two things, or three rather. One was to try and get people to view the moon virtually. and one thing that happened during the pandemic was an eclipse. And it was an event where we would normally go and look for numbers and try to engage people, but we couldn't. But we hosted it on Zoom and had it on Facebook Live, and we had so many people join in and ask questions and advise them on how to enjoy that. But we also, just before the eclipse, produced a song called the Eclipse Song, Annual Eclipse Song. And this was really to target young kids, to teach them about it and to make it fun. And we were stuck in the house, my husband and I, who's also the co-founder of the company, and our three kids. And they were our dancers and singers, because we're trying to, to share that with kids. So we've tried to use art as a way of engaging young kids, and that has been fun. And then also one thing we do is a cosmic quiz, which we host, we use Zoom to host. And this, we invite families to join in and ask all these questions, and also bring in music and find out there's so many songs that have some stars or the moon, and just try to engage the public. So it's been fun just trying to reinvent and to rethink of ways to engage the public without necessarily moving the telescope.
You know, it's like I love the intersection of art and music and science, and there are things that I remember better because I sing them. So that's fantastic. So, Astronaut Charles, how has EPIC, your educational foundation, kind of flipped or changed in this new paradigm?
We really haven't changed that much. When we started this program about probably about 10 years ago, we always recognized that an online component was very important. We wanted to build geographically, globally dispersed teams of students together to solve what I call these epic challenges that even NASA can't solve, like going to the moon and Mars and living there. But the thing that has changed, and I use the COVID pandemic as an opportunity, because I really believe education has to change. Kids learn differently, they're digitally connected, and we have to make it engaging. What we're doing in our program is we're connecting all the students on these great programs, these thousands of students, and we're watching how they work in teams. We're analyzing how they work in teams. So we're using artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing to understand the behaviors, to actually add some science to education. And so we have great learning analysts around the world that are working with us. And we have, you know, secure, open environment where it's anonymized, and we satisfy all the FERPA, GDPR, and IRB requirements, so that we can access this information, we can understand, and the goal is eventually personalized learning to make it effective for individual people. We know kids learn differently, and that's what we're trying to do, add some science to it.
I'm a big advocate for as personalized education as it can possibly be, because each and every one of us probably could tell a story of how something impacted us and probably still informs how we learn. All right, Zainab, tell me a little bit about what your initiatives or how they've changed.
I'll actually start with my experience as a student and how I think we can better teach online in 2020. And I think that what I found most effective is bridging the gap between what you're learning in the classroom and what students are experiencing in their own lives and in the real world. And this is where that component of personalization comes in, is because not everybody, and like someone in America is not going to be experiencing the same thing as someone in Canada or in the UK or so on and so forth. And so it's really important for educators and for teachers when let's say they're learning about climate or they're learning about ecology or something. I mean, there's forest fires happening in California, or hurricanes, or these natural disasters. If it's happening in your community, teachers could connect that to their learning and create this opportunity for project-based instruction, where students are now not only learning about climate change, but it's in the context of their own community. So applying context to content, which is what Steve mentioned in the beginning. And not only that, but allowing them to come up with solutions for their own community. And you don't know what could come out of that. They could come up with an actual solution that is workable and propose that to whoever has the power to implement it. But relevancy and personalization is really important. And the other factor is group work. Just giving students these assignments to do at home as homework isn't as helpful as giving them a group to work with, because it creates a sense of community, especially during this pandemic when you're socially distanced, when you're not in school. That sense of community is really, really important for kids, or else they'll turn to other things to find that sense of meaning and that sense of purpose. So I think from the perspective of a student, that's really how education right now, starting in the fall, should be done.
Now, I love that whole idea of relevancy. We've done a few things where I am in Tennessee, where we had a water problem at a county just south of here, and they took it to the middle school and high school students, and they sat alongside the town's commissioners, and the students help them solve the problem. So, and now they're more invested. These kids may go off to college, but they may come back to their community because of that ownership in that process. And I know Artemis and I experienced the art of connectedness when we kind of offered some free classes between Janet's Planet and Explore Mars back in the spring. We found these kids just wanted to be with one another, didn't we?
Yes, absolutely. It was hanging out. It wasn't just the subjects and the speakers, and some of which were eye-opening even to me at my age, but it was also the fact that, hey, there is Jesse. Hey, there is, you could see each other, the way they would greet us, me, you, as teachers. It was all so very warm. It was family-like. And I believe that a good teacher, also before, this pandemic, before when we would go into a classroom, you have to give them this feeling that they belong to this group, all of them, with all their quirks. Everyone has quirks, everyone has eccentricities, that's fine. Teach kids to accept each other and to accept their own quirkiness. Don't feel like, oh, I'm really an outlier and I can't, whatever. And basically, like Zainab says, relevance. I mean, whether I teach English to someone or any STEM subject, it is all about, is it relevant to your life? Because the moment it is relevant to your life, of the life of your family, it suddenly really, it lifts you up and it invigorates you and it will grab you and you will try to learn this. And I am absolutely convinced that 50 years from now, those lessons will still ring true with these, they're no longer kids, of course, these adults. And that's the whole trick, that you as a teacher must make them understand that school and education is not some, some chore like doing the dishes. It is a opportunity to enrich yourself, to learn how to find the information that will enrich your life. And this could be information on how to paint the fence, in the best possible way. It's not just about how to build a rocket and get us to Mars. It's, it's this learning ability, that's what you give them. It's not just the knowledge that we try to impart, but it is the means of finding the best answers to whatever question you are. That's what I believe you need to teach them.
Oh, and it's like, if we can instill a love of lifelong learning and curiosity, I think that's where we can all have a celebratory party and go, success. I think what's going to be interesting for me in 50 years is that I believe this particular generation may end up being one of the most creative, problem-solving generations we've ever seen because of this unusual circumstance that is happening in their lives. My hope is not only creativity, but critical thinking would be the new world order.
And of course, at the moment, the problem is that kids that don't have internet connection, that don't have a computer or an iPad or a Samsung tablet or whatever they need, that's, of course, those fundamental needs need to be met actually by the governments, I believe. And again, this is also relevant, how to deal with an emergency that even the adults can't fix for you. This is a life lesson. But facing problems in life head on and not being distracted and being completely distraught because of it, that's actually a more important life lesson than the mathematics in the end.
And that is a perfect segue to Steve Sherman.
I aspire to accommodate two ideas. And if you can accommodate these two ideas, I think you're on track to success. The first one is access, and the second one is hands-on. Students need access to real-life data. They need access to professionals in the industry. They need access to scientists who will inspire and invigorate them. And what I do is I make access happen through global collaboration. We do connections with astronauts and scientists, and obviously the hands-on experiments, physically building rockets, launching weather balloons, coding and doing expo projects. Once the kids are involved in those kinds of activities, they are memorable. And whenever I do my online interviews with STEM celebrities, I always ask them, What was that one moment that switched you onto STEM? Whether it was Charles Bolden, whether it was Doug Thomas, whoever, from an astronaut point of view, I asked them, there must be one turning point in your life that actually switched you onto STEM. And 9 times out of 10, it was either someone who was influential that came to speak to them at their school, or perhaps an event or a science center that they went to go and visit. So the more we start throwing these kids at events and guest speakers and opportunities to build rockets and to launch balloons into space, one of those events are going to spark that student and push them in the right direction towards STEM.
When we did polling after some of our classes and our camps this summer, that students literally said most of what you said. They love talking to the expert. They love getting kind of like real-time interaction with both the teacher and facilitators, but also the experts, and they love the hands-on. And so if we can make all of those things happen, I think that's how we move the STEM pipeline forward. George, maybe that's a good question for you, because I'm always interested in that inciting moment, a part of that person's hero's journey. Was there a person or instance that sparked your creativity and love of science and thought, hey, here's this moment of wonder for me? What was that for you?
Well, for me, I guess when I transitioned from medicine to space, it was this past October at the IAC conference in Washington, D.C. For the first time ever, I was at an international conference that had guests from Bezos to Bridenstine to VPs and CEOs of all the major space exploration companies. And I was like, wow, that person is standing right next to me. There was booths from all the space companies. I was able to go to any company, ask, hey, what do you do here? This is my background. How can I help within this industry? And that was a major event in my life that in 2 months after that conference, I ran for the vice chair's SEDS-USA, and I was elected. So if it wasn't for the community at IAC, then I don't think I would be on this panel right now.
In industry, if you're listening, it matters when you show up and what you say to young people and how you encourage them. And if you want your pipeline, this is what you must do. You have to engage the future. All right, Susan, maybe tell me a story or a specific activity, or even maybe something, a moment in time with the traveling telescope where you knew that engagement had happened.
I think I have a few instances because we work with kids a lot. And I think what made me start the traveling telescope and want to share the telescope views was looking at the telescope and seeing Saturn for the first time. It wasn't a textbook, it was Saturn and the rings. And I wanted to share that. Now, going back and taking this telescope around and having so many people while looking to the telescope going like, wow. Even just looking at the moon and seeing the craters, there's always that wow effect, or the excitement, or looking at Saturn and going, have you stuck something on the telescope? Is this really real? Like that excitement of just showing kids and adults what the outer world looks like, but what we've been able to create to look out there, what engineers have built, and how we're able to use these instruments to look out and to learn more about, space. And then also there's taking the planetarium around. Now, the thing that the planetarium does, especially with school, I come from Kenya and Africa, and we go to really remote schools. Some of the schools don't even have classrooms, they learn outside. And you take a planetarium and they get in and they're able to feel like they're flying in space. And I remember one kid said in an interview that she thought scientists used to lie about, space until she felt it. She was not in space, but that immersive world just took her there. So those are some of the powerful moments we've had going around, and really going to schools inspires me just seeing these reactions from especially kids in really remote areas, just having an opportunity and really valuing us being there or the opportunity they're getting is really so inspiring.
Anytime you see that light bulb moment happen, or a kid kind of like get it and you can nearly see them kind of like aflame with curiosity, that is one of my favorite moments working with kids, for sure. Charles, what about you?
I want to touch on all the points that all your wonderful guests have talked about and see if I could roll it all up, because I had that magic moment, you know, during Apollo. We have we have that opportunity now, right? But and all these events are great, you know. Access, Zainab and Steve, relevance, getting students to feel like they belong. You touched on creativity. Um, what we try to do at the Epic Education Foundation is we give the kids this experience. We ask them to reach beyond what they could dream of, right? Use their imagination. So when COVID happened, I looked at it as an opportunity. We didn't want our students to just mitigate the effects of COVID. We wanted them to imagine a pandemic-free world, and how could we accomplish that? So I think we have to teach teachers how to make these challenges exciting, how to hype them to be epic proportions. We need to connect students with key subject matter experts, like Steve said, and every now and then you can get an astronaut in a blue suit and they could show the pictures of them with M&Ms floating in space. But really, you have to make those connections throughout their life so that they do not drop out. 80% of the kids drop out by the 7th grade, even though they're inspired. So what we're trying to do in Epic Education Foundation is get these kids very young, teach them with problem-based and phenomenon-based hands-on learning, how to use their creativity and their imagination, but connect them with people that are just peers or near peers that become their role models, that help pull them along in what I call the STEM pipeline, right? So it doesn't leak. And so creating that magic. And the only way we're really going to understand how we're losing these kids is by monitoring what's happening. Why is it happening, like true scientists? And so I think all of you are right on. It's just, how do we get enough information to understand why we're losing some of these kids? And what can we do to help prevent that from happening?
And you know what, Zainab, that is a perfect question to bat to you. You have some ideas on that.
So to that point of losing students in that STEM pipeline, I've seen it happen. I've almost, it's almost happened to me. If I didn't have that nurturing environment at home, starting from very young, it started when I was like 6, then I wouldn't again be here on this panel. Because school wasn't a place that nurtured my interests at all. It wasn't a place that nurtured a lot of my fellow peers' interests at all, and it still doesn't. And there's research that has been done that many people who end up finding their passion is because of extracurriculars or things at home that they found themselves. It isn't because of the classroom. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And I've asked many of my friends, people that I mentored, you know, has there been a moment where you felt like, I just don't want to do this anymore? And they all said yes. And I asked them why. And they said that they felt like what they were learning in school and how they were learning it was not at all what they wanted to do. But the problem is that how things are taught and what they're teaching is not reflective of the industry itself. And so we have to think about, then why are we teaching things in this way? Why are we using this method of teaching? Why are we teaching these specific things? And anytime you ask anybody who is responsible for making these curriculums or for making these policies and stuff, they don't give you a clear answer. It's always, this is just how it's been. And if you look at the education system for the past 100 years, that is how it's been. Everything else has changed, and that seems to have remained the same. And so we need to change how we're teaching STEM to students, because they're getting this really bad idea of STEM is boring and it's the set of instructions and we just have to do what we're told, and there's no room for curiosity and wonder and investigation, right? If students have questions and things that they want to explore, it's almost always denied in the classroom because it's not part of the curriculum. And what type of learning experience is that, right? And so that's right there discourages someone from going further into that field, because they don't feel any sense of control over their learning, any sense of autonomy, any sense of purpose or meaning. I mean, you have this child with a spark that just asked you a question, that wants to explore something, and you dumped a bucket of water right on it. And that continues to happen. And so we have to put in effort ourselves as students to keep that spark alive. And so I think that there needs to be a reform in the method of teaching with STEM, because from the experience of a student, that I feel like that's the big problem. It's not reflective of what the industry is like. And I think there's room for collaboration between industry and schools to bring access to what it is actually like to work in that field.
I believe it's a big problem as well. Teachers tell you that, you know, you're 14 or 15, you're not good enough because you're not an A++ student. Well, neither was Einstein at that age. I mean, probably because he wasn't bored with his lessons as you are just describing, Zainab, but, you know, not because he was stupid. But even so, you know, people do not develop at the same speed as everyone else around them. Boys and girls develop differently, but also within the group of girls or within the group of boys, there's a difference. You can't say every boy of 12 years old has a brain that's exactly developed this or that way, nor can you tell that of girls. And what it does, our whole education system expects you to be at a certain way of thinking and curiosity at the exact same moment as every one of your peer age group. And your peer group might not be the age group at all. It might be younger kids or older kids that inspire you, or that you feel at home with because they spark your curiosity, or they take your interest seriously. And that's the big problem. So what we do in education too often, if we do it according to curriculum, we expect, cookies, a cookie cutter, you stamp, and they all need to be the same. They're not. And remember, if we're talking cookies that look different could still be very yummy. So it's so stupid, because we're losing out on a very large part of our society, of our young people, but also older. This also happened when you're 25 or 30. People expect you to be just like that because of your age group. Why? I mean, you're an individual. And if we want to make the best use of everyone's talent and curiosity, we have to give room to the fact that everyone is unique and everyone brings his or her, interests, solutions in their own specific way. And all together, we will make beautiful music. But you have to give it space to get that music happening, and that, regrettably, in the standard curriculum is not done. And at the moment, I even see that there is still quite a lot of bias against girls in STEM. If a girl doesn't have an A in mathematics, oh, she better does, languages. Why? I mean, why is a B- not good enough to do STEM?
That issue of grades and that pressure on these numbers all the time, it almost seems like as you go through that system and as you're a student, that you're only working for that grade. You're learning to get that number so you can get into a university or get into a program or so on and so forth. That deeper meaning and purpose of why you want to do something is completely lost. And I think there are things that teachers can do. I think they're limited sometimes, but I think that there are things that teachers can do to stop focusing on always what they're teaching, on like, this is what you have to learn for this, and this is what you have to learn for this, and start focusing on, why are we learning this? Why is this important for me? Why is this important for the people around me? And stop putting so much pressure on these numbers that are literally actually mean nothing, because most of the time they test what you can remember and dump out on a piece. It's like bulimia, dump it out on a piece of paper. And most of the time it is subjective, and yet people's lives are determined on those numbers. And so I think grades are a big issue that actually need to be taken away, and that more, feedback-based learning is given, instead of like giving you a number that tells you nothing about how you can improve. if education is, lifelong education, continuing to learn, continue to grow, giving them a percentage is not going to do anything. What did I do wrong? How did I do it wrong? How can I be better? We never get that. And
also, Zainab, it
Yeah.
might be that you aren't wrong. I used to date a young man in university, and he was a mathematician. And he sometimes got an A+++ because he solved a problem in a completely different way than any of the professors would have thought possible. So they could have said, oh, this is not standard. He didn't use the standard method. So, it failed. But what they did, they looked at it and go like, oh, that's a way of doing it as well. That's interesting. And actually that part of looking at, a child giving an answer and then go like, how did you come to that answer? And, that might be very logical, even if it's not the answer you as a teacher in your standard curriculum expected. So, this is, because the moment you tell a kid, you failed without asking, how did you get there? You might have, disturbed this going up trend of this child perhaps for life.
I'll be really quick. The stigmatization of failure is ridiculous because STEM is all about failure. That's a whole process of scientific investigation. And yet and I know in my classes, when we did lab, if someone failed at the lab, they would fake their data because they needed that grade and they didn't have time and they were constricted. I'm like, this is not science, right? And so that people get really discouraged. I mean, why is an F a bad thing, right? Learn from that, see what they did wrong, see how they can improve. And so, yeah, the whole grade thing is, I don't agree with it. And I think that we need to reform that if we want to move forward.
And Steve, weigh in.
Don't even get me started. I just did a TED talk last week on the fact that from a school's point of view, we've got 18th and 19th and 20th century methodologies and content and curriculum being taught in a 21st century world. The way we are actually conducting our classes is completely it's the antithesis to how industry in the world around us is actually working. So, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that some kids also are late bloomers. And how many of you have ever gone to your doctor and said to them, excuse me, what percentage did you get for your final year at medicine? 63%. You actually want to make sure that people leave with competency, skills, and not a measurement of how they performed on one particular day. So I'm also not a huge proponent of marks and results. And in fact, none of my classes, not a single one, involves results. It's all about experimenting and exploring and learning and engaging in it, because I would rather that you engage and fail within a group than and make a mistake and learn, well, that's okay, we're allowed to make mistakes, than saying, well, I got 40%, there must be something wrong with me. That I would never allow anyone to do that in any of my classes.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I'd like to jump in, if I can, talking about failure, because that's a big part of this. In our program, we teach students how to fail. Zainab is absolutely correct. You learn more from your failures than your successes. And so failure is very important. And we teach students how to fail, and also how to be creative. But another very important aspect, and it's been touched upon, is the idea of psychological safety. We want these kids to feel community, but we want that community to be psychologically safe. We want them to have that discourse. We want them to think critically, critique each other, but do it in a very nice way. But it's very important when a kid has a question that doesn't touch on what the teacher is teaching that moment, she could still make that question relevant to what or he can make that question relevant. And so these are very, very important points.
We're so obsessed with exams and succeeding and going to the next level and grading kids, and it's the reality after school is not that. Like, I have failed so many times with the traveling telescope, and that's the only way I've learned what works. And so trying to get kids to understand that one of the programs we do in partnership with Airbus Foundation, which has stopped because of COVID, is a robotics program. And the kids launch a rocket to Mars and the program. And we go to some schools that the kids have never used computers, but we have to teach them the basics as drag and drop and everything. But they manage, they fail, and eventually succeed. And the satisfaction you see from these kids once they've succeeded is undescribable. So it's just these things to showing them it's okay to fail, but it's also up to us in our leadership for us to have that in our mind, that it's okay for our kids to fail. It's okay for them not to get the best grades, but to learn not necessarily just from what they learn in the classroom, but from the environments and everything. So I think the big problem is really mostly with our leaders. Like, what are we doing as teachers? What are we doing as educators and people like that? What are we doing to make sure that our kids understand? Are we telling them that we failed? Are we telling them it's okay? So I think, yeah, or having programs that show that it's not that easy. And we always like using the examples of, launching rockets to space and everything. It's not that easy, and you fail. And that's the idea. So yeah, we do have a big problem in terms of the schooling system in the country, and hopefully things will change with time, and will not focus too much on grading and everything. Yeah.
George, any last comments on this subject, and then we'll close out?
Yeah, on the topic of failure, so when I first started university, I struggled in my classes, my math classes, my engineering courses, to where I had to leave school for a time. And I'll just make it quick, but a couple years later, I finished. But through that time, I had to reflect, and just last summer, I had an internship at Baylor College of Medicine in the Texas Medical Center. And for those of you that know where that is the hub of science for in the medical field. It's where the brightest and smartest scientists and doctors are. So the fact that I was able to work there was like, okay, it's okay to fail, but you have to move past it. And now I'm vice chair of one of the largest student-run nonprofits in the world. So it's okay to fail. You just gotta move through it, and eventually you'll start to shine.
I love that story because you didn't give up, and you decided this is where my passion is leading me. Again, in education, it's never this direct line. It's like this process of like, oh, up here and maybe down around here and around the mulberry bush and back and zigzagging, and that we need to maybe forego a little bit that it's all somehow somewhat linear. What does industry need to know about what they can do to help us in this process to create that pipeline that they most desperately need? Who wants to go first?
Oh, I'm jumping on this one.
All right.
This is my baby. Corporates need to invest in STEM events, in education and prizes, and sponsoring school events like rocketry, science expos, robotics, coding, and math competitions. And in addition to this, they need to fund underserved communities to give them access to equipment and even entry, because that's often the barrier to take part in these events. They can't even afford entrance fees. So they need to sponsor entry into the events and experiences. And I think that this will help to build a more diverse workforce, and diversity makes us stronger. We need to get ideas from all people, from all communities. And I think that industry right now might be reeling because of COVID-19, but yet some industries are thriving. And if they want to invest in the future of their own company, especially if they are tech or STEM related, if you don't invest in the youth of today, you're not going to have a skillful workforce in the future.
I'd like to say something in addition to what the panelists have said. Is just, I think that we need to really invest in, and industry really needs to invest in science and space education, because we need a generation of leaders, even our political leaders, who will understand science and appreciate science and make decisions that will be good, you know, for our environment, for our health, and for sustainable development. And if we don't invest in our future leaders, we will not have that.
I work with some amazing organizations, industries, and I think the really good ones, the really forward-thinking ones, understand this. I work with Boeing, I work with Siemens in education, and they really see that it's in their best interest to invest in education and so in their workforce pipeline. And what they also see is that they're not getting what they need out of the universities. And so they have to form these coalitions between the industry, academia, government agencies, in order to orient the curriculum in a way that it's meaningful. So when these students graduate, they could walk into a company, they know how to communicate, they know how to work in teams, they know how to be creative, they know how to access knowledge and teach themselves. And so I believe they're starting to learn this in the really amazing industries. We need more of it though.
George.
Yeah, so I think companies need to sponsor more peer-to-peer events. For example, Space Vision is a conference that is put on for students by students. It's a place where students can tell their peers about their experience in aerospace or space and the possibilities that are within the industry.
Zainab, you're a perfect person to end this one.
I think that there's two major things. There's the investment of resources like money, which have been touched on, but also the investment of resources like time, which I would say is really, really important. So with the money part, for sure having these events and these expos, but at the same time, I think as we're moving forward and COVID has kind of flipped what the classroom experience looks like, bringing those types of experiences into the classroom. I know that there's a project that our organization has partnered with a Toronto-based company that's working with Blue Origin to bring these science experiments sent to space in their space capsules, which is in the classroom. So it's not the separate event that people are having to register for and find on their own, but it is part of the school experience and that they're trying to do in 25 different public schools in Toronto. So I think that's one way, is partnership models between private sectors and public education to bring these experiences into classrooms, to bring that real world context to students. So that's maybe one way in which they can invest money, because that would take quite a bit of resources. They need to donate their time, and they, volunteer their time to speak to these kids, to answer their questions, because as a general theme that's been here is that just talking to these people can spark that interest, and it's in their favor, in these industry leaders' favors, because you're creating this workforce for yourself and sparking that interest. And then, another way to invest time is helping develop curriculum for these fields, because I think one problem that we have right now is academics are responsible for developing curriculum that we have, which are great. I love academics, but they're really from an academic lens. They're not thinking about industry, which is why our classrooms are not reflective of the actual workplace. So I think that they need to donate their time in that, and supporting whether it's governments or organizations in developing those curriculums for students to create better workers who have those skills like creativity and innovation.
If you have questions for these panelists, we're going to list all of their organizations. If you want to reach out, find out more, we're going to list their websites. And I think just in closing, it's like these beautiful people have been saying to us all day, whatever we do in education, it has to be fun. It has to create excitement and wonder. It has to be meaningful. It needs to be immersive and interactive, and it's got to be personal and relational. And if you want your pipeline, come on board. We have got places that we can employ you and give you many an opportunity to share your expertise and be that light. Be that pinpoint, that moment of that big bang explosion for some kids' excitement and entrance into our space industry. We thank everybody for your time. Again, panelists, I am so honored and privileged that you joined me today, and I'm certain you will be hearing from me again.